Since it arrived on our TV screens earlier this year, House of the Dragon has attracted millions of viewers. It's received rave reviews, with some going as far as to say that the show is better than Game of Thrones. One thing that viewers have found confusing are the time jumps. As a result, new actors have been casted to play older versions of certain characters. Stay tuned to find out what Matt Smith had to say about this. House of the Dragon Episode 6 introduced a new Rhaenyra Targaryen. As the Game of Thrones prequel skips forward 10 years, Emma Darcy takes over from Millie Alcock in the lead role, while other characters, Alicent, Laenor, and Laena, are all played by new actors as well. It's a bold creative choice that has already caused a stir among viewers, but it's also one that fellow actor Matt Smith really relished. Smith plays Rhaenyra's uncle Daemon Targaryen across the time jump in the show and has one of the closest and most complicated relationships with the princess. "I loved having two actors play the same part because it did a lot of the work for me," he explains to Total Film ahead of the show's premiere. "Whereas you have to kind of imagine that stuff sometimes, there it was just a real, physical, energetic change between the two actors that I found really useful and really entertaining to watch, and I think it really worked as a concept." The actors play Rhaenyra across different periods of her life. Alcock is the younger Rhaenyra during her teenage and adolescent years, beginning around age 15, up until the eve of her wedding at 17, while Darcy stars as the adult princess. Their story begins in episode 6 with the birth of Rhaenyra's third child and continues throughout the remaining episodes. However, despite all of these changes the young princess goes through, it seems one constant throughout the show will be Rhaenyra's relationship with Daemon, which Smith describes as a deep connection. "I think there's only really two people in the whole kingdom apart from his dragons that Daemon will sort of concede to," he continues, "and one of them is Rhaenyra and the other is his brother. I think, there's a deep affection and intimate understanding of one another, really, more so than he has with any other characters." As the stakes get higher for the future heir to the Iron Throne, it will certainly be interesting to see how this develops in the second half of the HBO series. House of the Dragon airs weekly on HBO in the US and Sky Atlantic and now in the UK. In other House of the Dragon news, recent episodes have come under fire for being too dark, with viewers being unable to see what's going on in some scenes. But what did the show say about the backlash? The 7th episode of House of the Dragon was released on Monday, with some scenes set during the night, but a number of fans complained or joked about how poor lighting meant they could not see what was going on. In response, broadcaster HBO Max said, "The dimmed lighting of this scene was an intentional creative decision." A significant number of viewers tweeted about the darkness, and the network replied to several of them with the same message. One viewer said, "You've got to watch House of the Dragon at night in the dark with blackout curtains drawn tight, because if you try to watch while the sun is out, you can't see a thing. This episode of House of the Dragon is so dark it's unwatchable," tweeted another. "Might as well just turn off my screen and listen to it at this point." Other fans agreed. "It's amazing with the budgets Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons have. They can't produce better lighting for the dark scenes," one wrote. "Might as well drive with sunglasses on at night. The nighttime visuals in House of the Dragon are simply too dark," concluded another. "These scenes would be so epic if I could actually see what was happening." But others defended the show, with one writing, "If you couldn't see the full moon scenes in House of the Dragon, then your TV contrast sucks. I loved it, it was beautifully shot." Another said, "Half the world is mad about House of the Dragon being too dark. Have y'all ever had an intense romantic convo on the beach at night? Adjust your settings if you can't see." Some made light of the backlash, with podcast host Jesse David Fox tweeting, "I was gonna tweet that last night's House of the Dragon was too dark, but then I realized my TV was off and I actually hadn't started watching yet." Many fans will remember a similar controversy that plagued Game of Thrones last season. Miguel Sapochnik, who directed the latest episode of House of the Dragon, previously defended the darkness of a Game of Thrones episode, The Long Night, during an interview with the IndieWire Filmmaker Toolkit podcast in 2019. "Everybody who was making it thought about it a lot, bought a hook and line and synced it into the idea that it was about embracing the darkness and made that decision," he said. "I can't control what people watch on. I've never made anything to be seen on an iPhone. Everything I've made to be in the largest format possible, to be experienced with people, and The Long Night is made to be watched in a cinema with as many people as you can possibly stick in there. And I don't have a solution for the problem that arose out of it." But like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon was not released in cinemas. It was launched on TV and streaming earlier this year and received mixed reviews from critics, with The Guardian describing it as a roaring success, but The Wrap saying it pales in comparison to its predecessor. What do you make of the show so far? Another House of the Dragon story is that many believe the show is promoting incest. Let's take a look at that. Beware spoilers. The idea of incestuous relationships in Westeros has been present ever since Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1, when Bran Stark caught Cersei and Jaime Lannister getting a little too close in a Winterfell tower. But in a world where murder, while not exactly unpunishable, was certainly a common occurrence that just about every character could and would partake in, incest remained one of the last great taboos even in its more medieval society. That's definitely not the case in House of the Dragon, which has so far presented multiple cases of people marrying within the family. King Viserys was married to his cousin Aemma when the show started. Alicent has betrothed her son Aegon to her daughter Helaena, and that comes after Rhaenyra had suggested one of her own children could perhaps marry Helaena. Rhaenyra first married her cousin Laenor Velaryon and has now wed her uncle Daemon. The moral code saying incest is wrong does not, despite an inherent weirdness to it for audiences. In having Rhaenyra marry Daemon and present this as a good decision for both characters, one of whom is very much set up as the show's main hero, both politically and romantically, House of the Dragon really does seemingly want viewers to root for incest. Why is this? Well, it's likely because of how enthralling the romance between Daemon and Rhaenyra Targaryen is. House of the Dragon has been building up this romance between Rhaenyra and Daemon for some time, long before Emma Darcy replaced Millie Alcock in the role of the former. It's clear in both cases there was a chemistry between the characters, and a spark of desire that, ultimately, would have to result in the two of them together in some way. Although Daemon's actions when Rhaenyra was younger were certainly questionable, to put it mildly, the show has done enough to make it clear these two characters are an endgame couple, and to sell why that should be. That certainly goes for helping to demonstrate the political importance. For Daemon, the line to the Iron Throne he's long been denied. For Rhaenyra, a great and wealthy warrior to help support her claim. For both, the chance to have children who will become heirs to the Iron Throne and whose lineage cannot be doubted. But it's also true romantically as well. Daemon and Rhaenyra have clearly been shown to long for and love one another, presented as lovers more so than relatives. They're a rare couple who marry for duty and love, and so, in a world where incest is already normalized, it works. In contrast, Game of Thrones actively had viewers rooting against incest. Its biggest romance in this sense was Cersei and Jaime, but as the former became increasingly villainous and the latter strove toward redemption, it made audiences want them to be apart, not together. All of this then continued into Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen's romance, despite the position of both of them as great heroes. Because Game of Thrones had never previously supported the notion of familial love affairs, it was that much harder to root for them as a couple, with even Jon himself unsure of the idea. There were arguably some chemistry issues between the pair as well, but mostly, there was no real grounding for that kind of relationship to spring up so suddenly in Game of Thrones, and so it's far more jarring and has a much greater ick factor, which stands in stark contrast to how House of the Dragon has presented these things. And that's all we've got time for. What have you made of House of the Dragon so far? Let us know, and thanks for watching.